All right, so we're going to talk about management structure or the history of management. The history of management, where we were and where we are now. So quickly, I'm going to start with classical management theory. And by the way, this was taken from the Mullins text, Organizational Behavior, this caption. So we have with us classical management theory. That's where we start, right? We're going to start with classical management theory. So classical management theory is very hierarchical in nature. There's a masculine culture behind classical management theory. And when I say masculine culture, I'm referring to an environment where the idea is to do as I say, right? An environment where feedback is not encouraged, right? That is common in some organizations, like the military, which is a good example, right? And there are some major organizations that has an element of that too, right? But the military might be a very good example. So the emphasis is one of a very formal structure. It's very hierarchical in nature. To get to the boss may take you a long time to reach to the boss. There's hardly you may not have an open door policy, for example, in that environment, right? But there are some other important variables that comes with classical management theory. Classical management theory reminds us that we need to delegate, organize, and coordinate some very important variables when you're managing an organization. Coordinating and delegating and so on, right? Extremely important. So this is classical management theory. Very robotic in nature too, Very robotic in nature. And the idea behind it is this. I pay you, you perform, right? I don't want to hear about your other issues. I pay you and you perform, I will reward you if you perform well, all right? And the basis of that came from a lot of work by Ori Fayol and Taylor. Ori Fayol and Taylor. Taylor was from the US, Ori was from France. So then we move on quickly to human relations management theory. All right. So over the years, based on several studies and so on by Mcgregor and Hertzberg, the Hertzberg hygiene theory, we would have discovered that people are not motivated by money alone. And we would have discovered that people aren't robots. We're not robots at all. We have feelings. We like recognition. We like to feel good. We like that pat on the back. Good job. We like that, right? And Hertzberg hygiene theory reminded us of this. Hertzberg hygiene theory, for example, reminded us that, hey, people are not only motivated by money, they are motivated by other factors. Recognition, for example. Recognition, giving persons responsibilities, appreciating your staff, right? Those are the things that also make people happy, motivate them, for example. All right. And then, Mcgregor, I can talk about Mcgregor's X and Y theory, for example. The X theory argued that people are lazy, and the Y theory basically argues that people aren't lazy, they just need to be motivated, right? So, we were growing and we eventually discovered these things. So it is not that classical management theory became irrelevant, but it was not the only aspect of management that we should be working with, right? So that human element came in. And then we moved to systems management theory. So systems management theory basically combined, as you see, it's combining classical management theory. It's combining classical management theory along with human relations management theory. But apart from that, there's something more, right? You see, the best way to discuss or to explain systems management theory is through a systems manager, for example, or a systems leader. So I'll give an example. Sheikh Zayed, for example, was a systems leader in that he was able to bring several sheikhs together, several rulers together, to agree and to form one country or one federation we know as the UAE today, right? I imagine it wasn't an easy thing because persons had different perspectives and so on, right? But he was able to do that, right? So you had one common goal, you had one direction, one objective, and you have now today you have Dubai, we have Sharjah, we have Abu Dhabi, and so on, right? So yes, and Mandela, what could have been argued as being a systems leader as well, bringing two factions, major factions together, right? So, but to be a systems leader, you need to be open-minded. You need to have a different perspective. You need to have a broad perspective. You need to consider or listen to the voices of others. You need to consider many factors, culture being a factor, political factor, economical factors. You need to consider all these factors in your decision making. You need to recognize, a systems leader must always recognize that the persons that he or she work with would have come from different backgrounds, different regions, they speak different languages and so on. And that is why I often tell students that the leaders of tomorrow, especially in those larger type organizations, multinationals, it's already happening. These leaders will be better off being systems leaders, yes, because they will be working in a very dynamic workforce, right? They have to integrate the team, right? And to do that, you find yourself blending the human relations element as well as the classical management theory element coming together. All right, coming together, those two management structures coming together and creating a leader or creating a management approach that is, yes, all embracing, and a management approach that is effective as well in managing, a management approach that has that is forward thinking, right? And then we move to systems management theory. Then we move to contingency management theory. Contingency. So anytime you hear the word contingency, it speaks of mitigating something. It reminds us of addressing a problem, putting things in place, plugging the hole, right? Plugging a hole in the bucket, right? Stopping something from happening. Might be permanently, might be temporarily, right? Yes. So, but here's the thing. Contingency management theory is closely associated with the whole idea of a situation that might have occurred. So contingency management theory argues that, hey, there's no one right management approach because it all depends on the situation. If the situation changes, right? If the situation changes, you'll require an umbrella. If the situation changes, you cannot drive your convertible all through the town. Yeah. If the situation changes, you may have to downsize your staff. If the situation changes, you may have to diversify. If the situation changes, you may need new management, a new philosophy. Yeah. Right? So as the situation changes, you need to put contingencies in place to avoid hemorrhaging, to avoid dangers along the way, right? So a lot of companies have put contingencies in place. For example, when you look at education, they have put contingencies in place by having blended learning and the option of full distance learning, right? Because the situation requires that organizations do that, right? In the year 2020, we have endured the coronavirus. We've been challenged by it, right? But we have been putting contingencies in place, right? To keep the business, the business wheel moving, to keep organizations operating, right? Life has to go on, so we have to put contingencies in place all the time, right? So that is it there. Classical management theory, human relations management theory, systems management theory, and then we have contingency management theory that is influenced by the situation. All right, testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3. Thank you so very much.